Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mangg, and welcome back to Hanging with Mangg. We're playing a little bit of Elden Ring today. If you've been paying attention and you care, you'll probably know that the Elden Ring DLC release date was finally announced. Shadow of the Erd Tree coming out June 21st. So, not that soon, but not that far away. And so I was like, okay, well, I haven't played Elden Ring in quite a while, as far as like a solo playthrough. So I should do that before the DLC comes out. And, yeah, I mean, based on what people were saying and speculating, it sounds like the DLC might start at like that egg after you fight Mangg, which is pretty late game. So I think the DLC I mean, the DLC is probably going to be pretty high-end stuff. So I'm planning on just doing like a full playthrough here, and this will be the character I do the DLC with, which will be pretty... I mean, I'd rather be overpowered than underpowered going into a DLC. A fucking FromSoft DLC. It's usually like the best / hardest content they make. And yeah, I mean, the Elden Ring DLC sounds pretty wild. Like the landmass they're adding is like the size of Limgrave, which is big. 8 new weapon types and 10 new bosses or whatever it was. Like, just, yeah, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. After being personally a little kind of disappointed with Armored Core, it's gonna be great to just get back to some proper FromSoft shit. So that's that. The build I'm gonna do is pretty much just like a quality build. Sort of, maybe leaning a little bit more towards strength. But, I like, especially first time for a FromSoft experience, I like flexibility. I like being able to just equip a lot of different weapons and stuff. But, yeah, I mean, magic is a whole other thing that I'll have to get to later. So, this week on this channel, we had some more Archipelago and some more Gloomhaven. That'll continue this week, although this most recent Archipelago run, there isn't, like I said, there isn't that many videos, so it'll finish pretty soon. And I'm not sure what to do after that. Pacific Drive came out to pretty good reviews, so maybe that's worth a Let's Play. I don't know exactly how long of a game it is, but I doubt it's that lengthy of an experience. It looked kind of horror-esque to me, but none of the tags or anything mention any sort of horror elements. It's more just like supernatural stuff, like it's like Stalker. Although Stalker's fucking horrific, so I don't know. It could be worth a try. Otherwise, I mean, there's loads of games that are worth doing a short little Let's Play of. I mean, I know the channel's just kind of been heavily consumed by Archipelago stuff, but it's really... It just fits me so well. You know, it's like relatively short experiences that are different every time. You know, there's a whole bunch of games, so I can just constantly flip through different games. And it's just like, it just kind of suits my gaming ADHD, sort of, you know? So, I don't know, I just really like Archipelago. Obviously. And, you know, this channel is mostly just things I want to play when I want to play them. So, I don't know. I can't feel too bad about just doing lots of Archipelago stuff. You know, I try to pick different games each time. So at least there's some variety there. I don't know. I don't know. That's pretty much that. We did have solo role manging on Thursday, which was a pretty... I mean, it was a fun session. Solo RPGing is... I mean, I guess I didn't know what to expect when I started it. Just because it's like, you know, I had kind of the same reaction that most people have when they hear solo RPGs. It's like, how can you possibly play an RPG by yourself? I mean, the dynamic of player versus DM is just so ingrained into the hobby. It's, you know, it's like if every video game ever was just like multiplayer. You know, with like only multiplayer versus other players exclusively. There's no such thing as like AI, NPC, you know, whatever. It was all just player versus player, everything. And then somebody was like, you know, I'm going to play a video game by myself. It's like, how can you do that? That's basically what it's like. But I mean, mostly, I guess what it's kind of been is more of like a world building exercise, really. And I feel like it probably wouldn't be that way if I was playing in like a really established setting. Or like real life. If for whatever reason I was solo RPGing a game set in like the modern day Earth, you know, there wouldn't really be any world build. I mean, there still would be, I guess, because there'd be plots and there'd be factions, and you know, it's always going to be kind of that DM aspect to it, regardless of the setting. But yeah, I mean, Thursday's session started out with just me being like, yeah, let's just find a random quest. Let's find a new quest and go on that. And that led very quickly, after kind of figuring out what the quest would involve, to me fleshing out this whole big city in the desert nearby, and like what sort of people run the city and how it operates and why it exists, and you know, things like that. And that took up a big chunk of time. That was like a lot of the session, really. And then I actually started my journey to go to this city in the desert, and then along the way I happened to roll a random encounter. And, you know, we did some dice rolls to determine some aspects of what I encounter. Like, I rolled that I encounter a rival faction, and they're searching for something. Then we rolled for what they're searching for, and it was something related to, like, a prophecy. And then I had the random idea that what if I'm, like, the thing that they're searching for as part of their prophecy? And, you know, I didn't roll what kind of creatures they were. I just decided that they were centaurs. Because, you know, I've been looking at this 13th Age Bestiary book that has some really interesting ideas. And so, you know, I happened to see the centaur section. And there's just really cool ideas there. And I'm like, okay, this would be great. What if this happens here? And this is going on here. And then we just kind of got more into world building of the centaurs that live in this region. That they're a divided faction themselves, with one half of them being more focused on like their horse aspects, one half focused more on their human aspects. But they're also kind of like not an oppressed faction. I don't know what the word I'm looking for. They're kind of in between a rock and a hard place. You know, to their west is a big desert, and the big city there is ruled by extremely powerful magi that probably don't give a shit about them. You know, and will just slaughter them if they start encroaching into their desert. And then to their east is the ever-expanding, you know, human nation, the Golden Union, that arrived on this continent a couple hundred years ago. And has just been spreading more and more and taking over more and more land and stuff. And they're just kind of, their numbers are dwindling, and they're infighting between their own two factions, you know, so they're really not in a good place. But they have this prophecy that an outsider will come and unite the centaurs and lead them back into prosperity as the Brotherhood of Kuros. And so all these things just kind of get developed, you know? That's sort of DMing, and that's kind of just writing and storytelling in general. When I started that session, I had no idea of anything. I had no plan, nothing. I was just like, I'm going to roll up a quest and see what happens. And then it ended with us having, you know, the city of the Magi, Amelamar, and the Centaur, the rival Centaur factions in the middle, and this prophecy that they have. And it's just, you know, that's how it goes. It's really cool. So like all RPGs, you know, there isn't really like a point. Yeah, I tell my family that, like, when they play, there's no winning D&D or RPGs. You know, there's no end game that, yes, you have won D&D and you never can have to play again. Like, you know, it's just a story that just keeps going, and it's the never-ending story, really. There's no wasted time. You know, as long as you're enjoying the experience.
Thank you, but I can't, even if they can ensure that if you father.
It's just RPGs. So yeah, I mean, I'm really enjoying it. I like to think people that tune in also are enjoying it. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. Who knows? I don't have any plan of where this campaign and this world is going to go. But now, you know, I took my big world map and I wrote in Amelamar for the city in the desert. And I know what that means now. You know, I know what that city's about. And in between, in that little stretch of land, I wrote Centaur territory. So it just kind of is ever expanding. So then someday I can just have this fully detailed, you know, living world that I can just plop people into. Be like, yeah, that's Centaur territory there. And you could just do that all from the start and just plan out your whole world. People do that, but we're making it up as we go. Over on the exploring series, put out a video on There Was a Crooked Man, which was pretty well received overall. I think people liked that. You know, getting back to SCP, the nice, creepy, decently long horror story with exploration logs, D-class, all that good stuff. But this week I worked on a video for 40K about Slaanesh, the Lord of Excess. And yeah, I don't know. For some reason, I don't know, it's a 17-minute video or something like that. But it felt like 45-minute video, you know, to work on. I don't know why. I think I'm not that interested in Slaanesh. Like, of the four, he's probably my least favorite. So I think that's a factor. But then, yeah, also I had to, like, tiptoe around, like, the sexual aspects of Slaanesh. Stuff like that. I don't know. I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's fine. But yeah, that's what that is. And then back to SCP next week. There's an SCP on the poll that I'm very excited about. Even though I think it's going to be a lot of work, I think it'll be really cool to have it done in, like, video form. But previously I did an SCP that was, like, made in RPG Maker. And that was a pretty cool one to do, because that was kind of like my video game story stuff, you know. It was nice just to have a complete, like, visual medium. But this one, and I'm gonna go and find the number for it. It's SCP-6634, Where the Flood Couldn't Reach. And it's quite unique because it's basically the entire thing is presented as a point-and-click adventure with, like, pixel art. It's really cool. And there's, like, multiple endings and stuff. So I still am not quite sure how I'm going to present it, like, with the multiple endings and stuff. But just the visual of it is really cool. And then, yeah, the 8,000 contest wrapping up in about a month as far as the judging is concerned. Voting. I have not read any of them yet. Obviously, the one I'm most interested in reading is DJ Cactus's. But yeah, I haven't read any of them. There'll be plenty of time for that. So yeah, I mean, as I discussed last week, 40K is going to be ending. My series, not, you know, not the franchise, but my series on it is going to be wrapping up. I announced that on Patreon. That I'm going to be finishing up all the current poll options, which is kind of lame. Like, no matter what, it's going to be kind of just an unfinished thing. Because the original plan was to do videos on every Primarch, which is a lot of videos. You know, that's like 20 videos. And really, we're going to end up with like 4 or 5 of them. And it's hard to say if they're, like, the most important of the Primarchs. I mean, I did Robute, like, no doubt, very important. And I did Lionel Johnson, who currently is pretty damn important. But, like, I'm going to be doing Fulgrim, who is fairly there, you know, and important. I don't even remember the other one I was going to be doing. I don't know. It just... it's going to be unfinished. That's the thing. And two of the other ones that I'm going to be doing to wrap up are like Armaments of the Tau, Armaments of the Necron, which means I'll never get to Armaments of the Eldar. But yeah, I mean, after that Gene Stealer video, just disaster of view count. And I know that I have fans that are like, yes, I love your 40K stuff. It's great. Keep it up. But it's a numbers game, isn't it? I can't believe I died there. It's just a numbers game. I think probably there is a way that I could do 40K content that is more popular and fits my audience a little better if I focused on stories. I mean, I guess, like, if I just summarize... I mean, at a certain point, I'm literally just summarizing books, right? Like, how could it be anything other than that? Pretty much all lore and info and all this comes from either, like, source books for the game or novels or short stories. And I don't know, the book summaries. Like, if I'm gonna do book summaries, I'd rather do, like, Brandon Sanderson. Stuff that I really, like, enjoy reading in my spare time. I mean, I like 40K as a setting, but I don't actually read that much 40K in my free time. Mostly I read fantasy. I guarantee that I could have an audience of people that would like me to summarize, like, Brandon Sanderson's book. But I don't know about that. I feel like I'd have to break it up into parts. And I don't know, like, it just seems kind of wrong to me as someone that likes reading books. Like, if I summarized a movie, like, if I sat here and gave you a 25-minute summary of Avengers Endgame and the events that occur in that, that is in no way close to actually viewing the film yourself, right? So, but at the same time, I summarize SCPs, and I always say that it's not really a substitute for reading the SCPs yourself. So, I suppose. But, initially, my SCP summaries were, like, pretty broad. Like, I cut out a lot. Nowadays, I cut out quite a small amount from the average SCP. Like, I mostly just, like, rephrase it. To be perfectly honest. I mean, I do cut out some things. And I mostly just enjoy the flexibility that my presentation offers me compared to, say, the Volgan, who has to read it kind of directly one for one. Like, the Volgan could never do... He can't do a lot of SCPs, to be honest, that I've done. And, you know, like the point-and-click adventure one, he could never do that. It wouldn't really work for him. I mean, maybe it could. It just would be a bit trickier. Anyways, I'm sort of just ranting at this point. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd get to the same amount of detail. But yeah, I mean, if I was going to summarize a full book, it would have to be in a decent amount of detail for me to be like, okay, I don't feel bad about what I've done. But it wouldn't have to be multiple parts. Like, I operate on a weekly schedule. And I just cannot put out like a 5-hour summary every week. Yeah, man, I can't really fathom how long that would take. Yeah, it really depends on the level of detail I'd go for. If you're doing a 20-minute summary of A Way of Kings, you're cutting out just obscene amounts of details just to kind of get the big events out there. But if I'm going to do a 4.5-hour summary of A Way of Kings, I really have to sit there with that book and my keyboard for days and days, going over every page and deciding, okay, what goes into my summary and what doesn't. A lot depends, I guess, on like what I do with dialogue. For SCPs nowadays, like, I often go line by line for dialogue. But to do that in a full novel, I mean, that's crazy. Rather than just summarizing the conversation. Yeah, I don't even really want to ponder it, just because if I ponder it for too long, I end up doing it, and then I don't really want to do it. It's too much work. I think it is a way to, like, skirt around audiobook restrictions, because I can't do copyrighted audiobooks, but I'm sure you can do a summary. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't start with A Way of Kings, I'll tell you that fucking much. I'd start with, like, Warbreaker. Or maybe one of his short stories or something. I don't know. I mean, for right now, the plan is finish up 40k as it is, and then just do some SCP for a bit. At the very least, until I've gotten all, like, the 8,000, or a bunch of the 8,000 contest entries out there. Because that'll be a big surge of videos. And then I guess we'll see how I want to move forward. If I want to just focus on SCP or not. Yeah, it's really hard to say. My only conflict really is like myself, that like I don't want to just do one thing. That's really the only conflict. Otherwise, there's not really a good reason for me not to do solely SCP. What? Where is this? Say it's over there. Anyways, that's that. And the last thing to talk about, I guess, is my family D&D that I've been running. And this week I kind of, gave up on them as far as like sandbox campaign and this Aboleth plot that I put in front of them and things like that. I was just like, they're clueless. They need to be really just driven forward with, basic sort of like a Lord of the Rings kind of plot. Something really not clever or subversive or anything like that. No big mysteries, just go here and do this and save the world. Please, please, brave adventurers, we need you. Like, basically, like, baby's first D&D is the kind of thing that they're looking for. So, I decided to run... We had a couple people missing this session. So, we basically ran a one-shot. But they kept their same characters and everything. Since I don't use an XP system, it doesn't really matter. So I ran a one-shot titled A Wild Sheep Chase, which is quite highly recommended by many people. It's one of those third-party kind of things. And it's pretty whimsical. It's pretty, kind of fantasy, fantastical stuff that just your average D&D player is probably going to enjoy quite a bit. Unless they really only like grim, dark fantasy stuff. And so the basic plot is that the adventurers are all in a location together, like a tavern. And... suddenly, while they're sitting there, in bounds a sheep, frantically, with a scroll in its mouth. And the players take the scroll, and it says that it's a scroll of Speak with Animals modified. And if they activate it, basically, the whole group can speak with... I don't know if it's intended that they're able to speak with all animals or just the sheep, but certainly it works on the sheep. So the whole group can speak with the sheep, and it doesn't really say how long it lasts, but it's kind of recommended, I think, by others that it just lasts the whole adventure. And once they activate it, they suddenly discover that the sheep can talk. Although that doesn't really make any sense, because speak with animals, all animals can talk. But not only can it talk, they learn that the sheep was not always a sheep. In fact, it's an elven wizard named Feinthir Shinebright. And it's funny that I can remember that name right now, because for the entire session, not a single player remembered the name Feinthir. They basically called him every possible variation on Feinthir throughout the whole thing. They could never remember his actual name. And as Feinthir is about to explain, like, his predicament to them, in bounces a half-orc with 3 wolves and then, like, a big brute motherfucker behind him. And the half-orc demands the return of his master's sheep. And so then the plot goes from there, and basically there is this wizard in, like, kind of a treehouse tower sort of situation in a forest nearby. And he has turned a bunch of guards that he's employed into various animal shapes to make them more threatening. I'm pretty sure it's, like, with their permission. Like, they understand that they're going to be turned into animals temporarily, I guess. But he's just got, like, some apes there and a couple bears and wolves, you know, things like that. And the plot is that this wizard is Feinthir's apprentice that was, like, mistreated, sort of. Not mistreated, but just kind of, like, that sort of situation where the master never thinks much of the apprentice and never thinks that he'll, like, become a proper wizard or become anything. So he just kind of, like, does mundane tasks all the time and is never given any responsibility or respect. I guess that's kind of mistreated. And so then one night it was kind of like a Kylo Ren, Luke Skywalker situation. He just wakes up and sees... I guess it's the opposite. But he wakes up and he sees his apprentice standing over him with a wand. And he had been turned into a sheep at that point. And so then he was just kind of, like, chained up. His apprentice had kind of gone a little crazy and paranoid. Because all of this revolves around this wand, which is a wand of, like, true polymorph or something like that. It's a very powerful, rare wand. And the wizard kind of... like, all his power and credit is pretty much just due to this wand. And now the apprentice has it. Master's been turned into a sheep. Master managed to escape with a scroll of speak with animals. And the adventurers have to kind of sort all this out. Defeat this evil apprentice. And turn the wizard back into his elven form. So that's the general plot, and it's again, it's definitely silly. There's a lot of opportunities for silliness with, like, the various animals and this kind of clueless elvish wizard, and the big climax. The apprentice uses the wand to turn his bed into a dragon. So there's, like, a giant wooden bed dragon, which is really just kind of, you know, it's just silly fun. Like, it's definitely not grimdark in any way. And, reading online, like, other people's experiences with it, like, again, it's very highly regarded. People have run it multiple times with, like, different groups, and all of them enjoyed it. And every time, like, the experience is different, depending on players' actions and how they, you know, handle things. Like, it's always a little different. I would say I don't think any group of players could have handled this adventure worse than my group of players. Have I played Time Splitters games? Do I think they should get ports on modern consoles? Yeah, I mean, I played Time Splitters 2 quite a bit back in the day. like multiplayer and stuff. It was pretty good, but you know, outside of nostalgia, like I don't know what they really offer on like PC nowadays compared to anything else. Like, I don't really remember much about them. I don't have like, I have loads of like good memories of Perfect Dark that did a bunch of unique things at the time and all that sort of stuff, but even that I wouldn't really care if it was remastered properly for PC nowadays, you know? Just been so much development since then. So yeah, my players, they started, I mean, they were very excited with the sheep. My sister was very excited. There was just this sheep, and it was frantic, and she was talking with it, and, you know, high adventure was about to start because of this poor sheep. And then the half-orc and his retinue showed up. And their first thought was to, like, hide the sheep. Oh, just hide them. They'll never know. It's like, how well can you hide a sheep in a bar? Suddenly. And so the half-orc was like, you know, I know you have the sheep, I can smell them. Smell them. What was Perfect Dark about? Like the plot of the single-player campaign? I don't know. I remember it was like, I have no idea. I remember there being an alien at some point, but I have no idea. She was like she was like James Bond, I think. After they realized that they weren't going to be able to hide the sheep, my mom was like, "Oh, you know, you've been traveling. Why don't you just sit down and have a drink? You know, we can sort all this out. Just have a drink." It's like, you know, he's been traveling for like half an hour, so, you know, he doesn't really need a drink. He just wants to do what his master commanded. And so then he's like, you know, my master is a powerful wizard. He can offer you money and magical artifacts if you just return the sheep. And so they started like whispering amongst one another. And basically their big plan was like, okay, let's hand over the sheep and then follow them and ambush them on the road. That was their big plan. I was like, okay, I mean, that's a decent plan. Fuck. How is that iframes? Why are there jumping iframes like that? I'm like, yeah, you know, okay, that's a decent plan. So that they hand over the sheep. And then they're like, all right, you know, you give us a reward now. And he's just like, I never said I had, you know, I had a reward. I said that my master is a powerful wizard. He has money and magical artifacts. So, you know, I will escort you to my master if you wish. And they're like, okay. So he takes the sheep, and they start heading back, and the group just kind of walks with them. Because they're like, oh, well, we want our reward. Terrible. So that whole plan of ambushing them just got thrown out of the window, and they just, like, walk with them into, like, you know, the evil apprentice's headquarters. Surrounded by potential foes. And I gave them, like, plenty of opportunities to, like, maybe change their mind or do something. On the road, I'm like, okay, you guys walk, like, a mile. Do you do anything? And they're like, no, I mean, not really. So they just kept going. And they traveled, like, half an hour into the forest, and they come across this, you know, tree tower thing. And they get taken up, you know, to meet the apprentice. And, you know, I think in the adventure he's statted as like neutral evil. But he's cordial enough. And he's, you know, glad to get the sheep back. The adventure doesn't really ever explain specifically why he wants the sheep back, but I think basically he's like paranoid that his master will find a way to seek revenge. So he wants to keep him really close at hand, but he's not evil enough to just like kill him or anything. So he just plans on keeping him chained up forever, which is also kind of evil. So I guess it works out. So he's happy enough that that his master's been returned. But and it's mentioned at the end of the adventure that the wizard is quite poor, like he's broke, so he doesn't really have any money to offer him. But I was like, okay, you know, I'm gonna give the players something. So he fishes out like a bag of silver, you know. It's like, there's this relatively small amount of money. I think he gives them like a scroll or something else. I don't quite remember. Then they're like, okay, well, have a nice day. And they just leave the sheep there and go on. And then they go back to town. They didn't even ask him, like, his name or anything. Like, no, nothing. And for a long time, they were quite confused about, like, what the situation here was. There was a lot of, like... They went back to town. Fuck. They went back to town. They went to, like, the bar, and they're like, what do you know about the wizard, you know, wizard that lives out there in the forest, and blah, blah, blah. And they couldn't even remember the guy's name. Like, if his name's, like, Fugther or something. And again, like, they were just confused and like, wait a minute, the wizard is the sheep? Wait, what? As if this wasn't, like, clearly established immediately. Yeah, quite confused about the whole thing. And none of this is in the written adventure module. You gotta fucking improvise all this shit. That's part of DMing. Don't think that you can just sit down with a pre-written module and just run it and go. Fuck. And, you know, they're playing in my setting, so they asked, like, who would know about, like, wizards that live out, you know, things like that. And I'm like, well, there's an office of the Ministry of Magic in here. You could go to them. And they went there. And they started asking about the guy out there, and they did get a little bit of info about the apprentice. And they kind of discovered that Fiantier had an apprentice named Noak that, you know, he's had an apprentice for a while, but he's just an apprentice. Like, he's not registered as, like, a full wizard or anything. And as they're talking to the Ministry of Magic, like, you know, agents, they suddenly all get the feeling that, like, you know, we're doing something bad. We're doing something, like, these guys might be in league with the Apprentice. Like, they think there's, like, this big plot involving all the government. They're like, we should just get out of here. We should get out. So they just leave in the middle of their questioning. Ah. Oh, fuck. Oh, I forgot. Oh, man, I haven't fought one of these in ages. So, eventually, yeah, after much more consideration, they decide on a plan to go back to the tower at night. And they're going to sneak in and steal the sheep. And, oh, yes, the other thing that the guy gave them as a reward was an arrow of teleportation. I don't remember what I was playing. Was that Baldur's Gate 3 or something? I don't even remember, where I was like, look at that arrow of teleportation or something. It would be so fun to just give your players, like, one of in a campaign and just see what they do with it. So I was like, okay, here's my chance. I'm going to give them one arrow of teleportation. And I explained the whole effect to them. And I think they asked me at some point during the discussion, like, if they're carrying a sheep and they fire the arrow of teleportation, will the sheep also get teleported? And I said, yes, anything that you're carrying will be teleported. Later on, when they actually had the sheep, spoiler alert, they're like, okay, I'm gonna put the sheep on his back, you know, so he can carry the sheep on his back, on his shoulders, and then he's gonna fire the arrow of teleportation. And I'm like, and they're like, you said carrying a sheep, it'll be teleported. I said, yes, I did say that the sheep would be teleported in that case, but I didn't say that you could have a whole sheep on your back and also fire an arrow. Like, the logistics of that with, like, I don't know. I feel like you could release an arrow from a bow in some fashion. I don't know how far it would go, though. Anyways. Oh, God, it just gets worse. It just gets worse from here. They go back at night, and they're sneaking around, and the place is kind of dark and quiet. Like, all the animal guards are asleep. Everybody's asleep. And the tower kind of has these, like, multiple elevated platforms. So the sheep is actually just tied up on, like, the first platform. They just can't really see it because he's kind of tucked in there in, like, this garden. He's tied to a tree, and he's sleeping. So they can't really see him from the ground. So you start thinking of plans now that they're here. And they assume that the sheep is going to be held, like, in the highest platform, the third and smallest platform, which is really just the apprentice's bedroom. Fuck. But the second platform is the biggest one, and it has some windows. They're like, okay, I'm gonna get my grappling hook up into a window with a rope, and we're gonna climb up. And one of the players has a telekinesis spell, and so she wanted to use telekinesis to actually lift the grappling hook and put it into place in the window. And I was like, okay, that is actually a good, clever idea. You know, you don't risk throwing and missing and knocking it around. Like, that is smart. That was, like, the only smart idea the entire night. And they get the grappling hook in place, and they're like, okay, 2 of us are going to climb, and 2 of us are just going to hang back. So, okay, who's going first? And so one of the players, he goes up, and I'm like, all right, roll, your agility. Because they're climbing just a sheer rope, like 20 feet up, with no knots in it, nothing, just straight up climb. And normally climbing rolls, I mean, it depends. It depends on the situation. Sometimes don't even bother rolling if it's not that interesting a failure. And sometimes failure would be very interesting. I thought this was one of the cases where failure would be quite interesting. So, he rolled like a 3 on his climbing roll. And I was like, that sounds like a fall to me. And I needed to decide how high up he was when he fell. It was a 20-foot rope, or like a 20-foot climb, so I rolled a d20. And I rolled a 10. So he fell 10 feet. He took a little bit of damage. And then I rolled a perception check on the half-orc, who was sleeping in a little hut nearby, to decide that if he heard this sudden boom, this thud. And I rolled publicly. I don't have a DM screen or anything, so I rolled publicly, and I rolled a 20. But I wanted to make it very obvious to them that he heard. So I was like, yeah, you hear a door nearby just being, like, kicked open. And so the player that fell is like, I'm out of here. He starts just running away. The other player, though, that was going to climb up is just like, yeah, I climb up. I'm like, okay. So he climbs up. He gets up there. And, it's very dark up there. There's no light. Inside this walled off second platform, and he starts pulling the rope up, but he was just kind of slow. So I'm like, you hear from below, intruders, I'm making things very obvious for them. If the half-orc were smarter, which I guess he wasn't, if he were smarter, he'd be much quieter about things, but he just wants to rouse the whole tower. And, so the other 3 players are just, like, hiding in the woods. The one player's up in the middle of this platform. Like, he cannot really go down. He pulled his rope up. He can't go down the platform without bumping into the half-orc now. And there's other things, other guards being roused. The apprentice himself is on the 3rd platform. He's now woken up. Things like that. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna hide. And my mom's like, oh, hide under the rug. And I'm like, I was just like shaking my head at this point. I'm like, this isn't fucking Looney Tunes. You can't hide under a rug. So he hides under the table. And the guard, the half-orc comes in. And I had already alluded to before his great sense of smell. And he has a lantern, so he quickly finds, the character under the table. And as he tosses the table aside, the player's like, okay, I'm gonna dash out towards the open door. And then he, as part of his backstory, he wrote in that he has this teleportation rock. Now, normally, stuff like that wouldn't really fly, but, you know, I'm pretty lenient with them. So he's got this teleportation rock. And we never nailed down, like, how exactly this operates. He wanted to... initially, he just wanted to teleport out the open door to where the sheep was. And I'm like, okay, but you can't see that location at the moment. You're under a table. And he's like, well, you know, I've seen it before. And I'm like, okay, so the teleportation rock can teleport you to places that you've just seen before, but can't see currently. And so I started asking him what happens then if there's an obstruction there of some kind at the moment you teleport. And another player's like, oh, well, he would be inside of the obstruction. Which is not somewhere you want to be. Just say that. So, I basically gave him a choice of, like, either he can only teleport to where he can see, out to a 50-foot range, or he can just use it to teleport 50 feet straight ahead, regardless of what's there. He has to pick one of the two. So he decided he can just teleport out to 50 feet to where he can see. That's why he made the dash for the door. As he dashed, you know, he took a hit. I'm gonna die now. He took a hit from the half-orc on his way out. But he then uses the teleport rock. He gets to the sheep. And that's when the apes are around. The apes have swords. The other players, they distract the apes to come out towards the woods. They distract a couple of them. And then on the way, when the apes get close, they light the forest on fire as a distraction. Which is really not a good... it's not a good baseline. It's not a good precedent to set, I think. Just lighting the forest on fire. It's like plan A. In the end, the warrior player that was up there just basically battled with the half-orc, with some assistance from another player shooting her bow, and they ended up killing the half-orc. They also killed the ape that was up there, and they got the sheep. And this is when the plan to use the teleportation arrow with him with the sheep on his back came into play. And ultimately, I had to just kind of stop them. I'm like, you could literally just walk down the platform, you know, just down this gentle slope here. Like, why? What are you doing? And that's when, you know, they've got the sheep, they're all together, and they're about to make a run for it, and that's when the apprentice bursts out of his bedroom with the bed dragon. And it's dark out, it's at distance, they can't really see, so they just think it's a dragon, because I just kind of describe it as like shaped like a dragon. So they're not really sure, you know, they're just, oh god, he's got a dragon. I think at first they thought he transformed himself into a dragon, but I made it clear that they could see, like, a figure on top. Long story short, eventually they decide that they're just gonna have to take out this dragon. And also the bear finally showed up and is charging at them. Wow, I forgot how hard this fight is. Fuck! That's a tough one, man. And, so they do use the arrow of teleportation in a stupid way. Initially... Yeah, so initially my mom, who was given the arrow, because she has a bow, she says, okay, I shoot the arrow of teleportation at the dragon. And I'm like, okay. And I had her roll, and she rolled pretty well. So I'm like, all right, you land a solid shot on, like, its neck. And then you teleport. And you teleport next to the arrow. And now you're in midair. Do you let yourself fall, or are you going to try and grab onto something? And she was, like, upset. No. And she says, no, I said I shoot the wizard. And I'm like, okay, I'm fine with that. She shoots the wizard. He, like, starts falling off of the dragon. The dragon collapses because it no longer is, you know, being powered, concentrated on. And she gets teleported on top of the apprentice as he's falling. And she's quite happy with this result. And she even tries to stab him with her knife while they're falling. Very cinematic stuff. Unfortunately, she completely bungles that and drops her knife. But he's just a weak little guy. So the impact kills him. Or not, doesn't kill him, because he needs to stay alive. But, you know, he's basically knocked unconscious. But as she's kind of on top of him, the bear charges at her, attacking his employer. Fuck me. Fuck off. Oh my god, I hate it. Stop it. What a shitty ass boss fight. What the fuck, man? That's some shit. Fuck. So they fight the bear, and the bear is really only focused on killing her. And he eventually succeeds, drops her down to 0. She rolls on the wound table and ends up with an internal injury that gives her disadvantage on all physical checks for the rest of her life. Now, I could be kinder and say that she could go to, like, a healer and get this removed and get patched up. Or, you know, you could just retire and get a new character. But they kill the bear. And my nephew goes over and he's like, I killed the apprentice. I stabbed him in the throat. And I had forgotten for a moment about the apprentice. because I was rolling on the wound table and all this other stuff with the bear. But the apprentice needs to survive for a moment at the end because he has to use the wand on himself. It's like a big hurrah. So I'm like, you know what, he grabs the wand and he uses it on himself. It was a little bit of just like Deus Ex Machina bullshit that I feel bad about. I should have remembered the apprentice. So that, you know, that's because that's just frustrating to a player then. But he used the wand on himself and it like fizzles and it gets activated in a broken way, and he transforms into just a pile of flesh and goop and like melts away. Now, this is of course supposed to be a massive fucking hint to the players that this wand is faulty. How could it be anything but a massive hint and a clue that, hey, maybe there's something wrong with this wand, and he didn't just purposefully turn himself into a pile of goop and melt it away. Like, basically, he turned into this. Except dead. You know? It's so funny. And there's half a page of the adventure, which is like 4 pages. That's all about, like, detailing the wand, how it's faulty, how it functions, and like, how difficult it is to get it to function properly now. And, like, what you should do if the players, like, are... Because the sheep is the wizard. He wants them to use the wand on him. And it's like... And there's a section where, like, oh, if the players do something to get the wand before the apprentice uses it on himself, make sure to, like, hint to them that something's wrong with the wand, like it's sparking or fizzling or something, or it's cracked. You know, give them hints about that using it might be a bad idea. And then there's a section about what to do if they don't want to use it on the sheep, or what to do if they use it and it malfunctions, or what to do if they use it and it functions properly. You know, there's a whole ending section about that. But my nephew's just like, right after the guy melted into goop, he's just like, all right, I grabbed the wand and I used it on the sheep. And I'm like, all right, you know, ignore all that shit. And basically, they need to roll a d20 and get like a 17 or higher on the roll. Otherwise, it malfunctions. And he dies. So he rolls a 19. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. It's better to be lucky than smart, I guess. Always. So he turns the sheep back into a wizard. And the wizard thanks them, you know, over and over and gives them rewards. He doesn't give them any money, but he gives them, like, some magic scrolls and a little gizmo. And he gives them a gizmo one of my random pieces of paper has, that you attach it to a lock and it picks the lock over the course of, like, 8 hours. My mom's like, well, what good is that? I have open locks as a skill. I have lock picks. And I'm just like, if you really can't see any possible benefit of, like, a passive mechanism that can open a lock after 8 hours, it's just disappointing. I mean, yeah, 8 hours is a long time. But it's also autonomous. You don't have to touch it. Anyway. He's also, you know, a transmutation wizard, so he offers them a transmutation... The adventure, which is written for D&D 5e, says transmutation spells up to 5th level. And it's like, if I said that to my players, they wouldn't know what the fuck that even means. They wouldn't have any clue what any of that means. They didn't even know what transmutation magic was. Like, they had no clue. So after a little bit of explaining, my sister's like, oh, can he turn my dog into a wolf? And I'm like, yep, he could do that. And so they all were just like, okay, that's fine. And so her dog is now a wolf. And they went back, and that was the end of the one-shot. And it's like, it's insane that they managed to take out the apprentice and save the elf after just doing basically everything wrong. But there you go. So yeah, for this adventure, I actually finally switched them over to Heroes of Adventure character sheets. I'd been slowly sort of transitioning over from Knave to Heroes of Adventure with just little changes, but now I gave them, you know, the new character sheets. It's still not full Heroes of Adventure, because I know the biggest problem for them is going to be the skill dice, where if you have a D4 in strength, you roll a D20 and a D4 and add it together. They just do not do well with multiple dice or different dice. Like, all they know is the D20 is everything, and then maybe the D6 or the D8 for, like, weapon damage. That's where they're at. So instead, I just took, like, the averages. So a D4 skill die is basically a +2. It's actually more like a 2.5, but to simplify it, really, it's a +2. A D6 is like a +3, a D8 is a +4, so on and so forth. Just for now, for simplicity's sake. Eventually, we'll do it properly. But it seemed to work well enough. I also didn't use skills, like, at all. Only the attributes. But next time we play, I'm actually going to do a bit more. I'm gonna start them over at level 1. So just bumping down, like, their health and their defense a little bit. But we're going to do skills, and I'm actually going to give them their class abilities. I had them pick their class a while back, like a few sessions ago, just to have it on paper with an idea of their character in mind. But now I'm actually going to give them a class ability at level 1. So it should be good. And yeah, what I'm going to run for them next is actually going to be Lost Mines of Phandelver, which is like the classic, you know, D&D 5th edition. Like the most recommended, like, starting adventure. Very classic D&D stuff. It was actually, I think, the first thing I ever ran for them, like, years back for D&D. But we definitely didn't finish it, and I certainly don't remember almost any aspect of it. So I'm just going to kind of drop that in, change a few things to fit my setting and the location they're in. And then, yeah, just run them through that. After that, I'm not sure what to do. Maybe at that point, I'll drop them, you know, let them go through the sandbox a little more. Or maybe find some other adventures, one-shots to run over and over, or I don't know. I wouldn't mind trying to run through Curse of Strahd, but I just worry that a few of the players might not really like the gloomy aspect of it. I don't know, I haven't read it, but I know the setting is... it's pretty dark and gloomy from the last time I looked at it. And I think we did play it... I played the haunted house. I remember that. I remember playing that online with a group. And that was definitely... I mean, that's kind of fun. It was deadly, but it was kind of fun with, like, the suits of armor animating. I think there was, like, a claw. There was definitely brooms. I know for a fact I died to a fucking broom. I guess that's kind of fun. I could probably recolor a few things. I don't know. I might be interested in checking it out. Anyways, I think that wraps up this stream. Most of that was just me talking about a wild sheep chase. That adventure is really great, though. I definitely recommend it if you're looking for just a fun one-shot that lasts just 2 to 3 hours. There's a lot of different angles that it can go. Clearly. But alright, so this week, more Gloomhaven, more Archipelago. On the Exploring series, a video on Slaanesh. All good stuff. For now, my name is Mangg. This has been Hanging with Mangg, and I'll see you fine folks next week.